Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our Getting to the Root of It series. We are in series number 3, which is autism. And it's going to be a great informational meeting tonight. We've got a lot of great things coming up. I've talked with Dr. Georgia Balsley and with Shelly Lewis, who is our guest speaker from Michigan. And let's get started. And so tonight, again, it's a series that we are running twice a month. And I'll tell you later on at the end what's coming up in the future here for you. So with that, I'm first of all, again, excited to bring on Dr. Georgia Balsley and then Shelly Lewis. I'm also very excited to let you guys know that we are really participants with a holistic mental wellness company that focuses on the microbiome. And the microbiome is your gut-brain axis. Many of you are aware of it. Some of you who are new on tonight may not be aware of the gut-brain axis, but this is central headquarters for our human body. And this is a really key component. The Microbiome Project started in 2007, and it's evolved. Just in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of science and clinical trials and studies being published. And as we know, and those that don't know, 80% of our communication is really developed down in the gut. And the vagus nerve is that connection from the gut up to the brain. And we've got some really great things coming in with these studies, and it's really interesting. However, what I do want to say is that it's really important that we all start paying attention about microbiome and what it really means to us from a health perspective. So with that, what I want you to do is get out a pen and paper, and you're going to take a lot of notes. If you do have questions, I want to try to open up Q&A at the end. Type them into the chat box, and we will try to get to those at the end of the call if there is time. If there isn't, then I'll follow up and get those answers off to everybody. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Georgia Balsley. She is a traditional naturopath of over 40 years, and she lives in Michigan. And I can humbly say that we are really good friends, and I love her dearly, and she's a wealth of information. So, Georgia, would you please share with the listeners, how did you get into naturopathic medicine? And before we get into some of the questions.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Jeff. And just to clarify, I have over 30 years experience. Not quite at 40 yet, but I'll approach that soon. And I got involved in naturopathic medicine actually after my round in the military, which I was a corpsman and worked cardiac cancer and finished out in the emergency room with a desire to become a physician. And at that time, I was looking at either nuclear medicine or forensic medicine because that was on the rise. We didn't have CT or MRI imagery at that time. And then through starting to have children, I got thwarted into alternatives, and that's where it stayed. And it has been a pleasure to help my patients regain health on a more holistic platform. I'm not anti-doctor. Doctors have their place, but I think together we can do great things. So I work in a functional medicine setting, and I say about our doc, she can do things I can't do, I can do things she can't do, and together we do great things. And so that's a little bit about my background.
All right, great. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service too, by the way. It's always an honor to thank our men and women who have served for our country. So, all right. So with that, what I want to do is I want to read this because I don't want to mess up the introduction here. And with autism or autism spectrum disorder, ASD, it really refers to a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. And according to the disease control, autism affects an estimated 1 in 59 children in the United States. So, Giorgio, autism is now labeled as or referred to as autism spectrum disorder. Can you explain why that is?
Sure. So autism covered just a certain category of individuals, and the term autism was changed in 2013 to autism spectrum disorder. So as we talk in this series, you're going to hear autism spectrum disorder referred to as ASD. So no, that's what we're referring to. However, that disorder included 4 independent disorders such as autistic disorder, Asperger's syndrome, pervasive developmental disorder, non-specified, and childhood disintegration disorder. So they ended up actually clumping them together and calling it autism spectrum disorder.
Wow, that's a lot of subcategories or what would you call that in medicine? It's not subcategories, it's diagnoses?
Subdiagnoses, yes.
Subdiagnoses. Wow, that's a lot. So what are some of the signs of autism, and when is it diagnosed, and how is it tested?
Great, that's a great answer. So possible signs of autism can include not responding to their name by 12 months of age. They don't point at objects or show interest, like pointing at an airplane flying over by 14 months. They don't play pretend games, like, remember when we were kids, we played with army men, or as us girls, we played with dolls and feeding our baby dolls at 18 months. They avoid eye contact and they want to be alone. They have trouble understanding people's feelings or even talking about their own feelings. They have a delayed speech and language skills. Oftentimes they repeat words and phrases over and over again. They give unrelated answers to questions. They get upset by minor changes. They definitely like their world in a very controlled atmosphere. They have obsessive interests. They could have some hand flapping, rocking of the body, or oftentimes spin in circles. They have unusual reactions to the way things sound, or they smell, taste, look, or even feel. And then they can have some social related skills. They don't respond by their name. They avoid eye contact. They don't even have the interest to share with others. Their interactions are achieved as a desired goal, and oftentimes their facial expressions are flat or inappropriate for maybe a situation. They don't understand personal space boundaries, and they avoid or resist physical contact. It's not comforting by others during distress time. So oftentimes, like children, they don't like to be held, or they don't like to be rubbed. You know how sometimes you and I might like to have our shoulders rubbed? They wouldn't like that. They also have trouble understanding other people's feelings or even talking about their own feelings. And and they also have like communication skills. So again, they can reverse pronouns, they can give unrelated answers. They sometimes can talk like a robot, and they don't understand jokes, sarcasm, or teasing. The most unfortunate part about testing for autism disorder is it's really difficult to test for autism disorder because there really are no medical tests, such as blood tests, x-rays, or CTs that, like for you or I, that we have pain in our leg and we either have a fracture or we can see something on x-ray. It's not available for them. And so a child's behavior and development are determined by diagnosis, and these behaviors sometimes can be detected as early as 18 months. However, they're generally considered more reliable at age 2. So there is a 2-step process in a diagnosis, and the step 1 of that diagnosis would actually be like a developmental screening, which is a short test to tell if children are really learning their basic skills when they should, and we see that often at the child's visits that we take. And so the doctor is actually looking to see how the child is learning, how they speak, behave or move. And the tests are usually performed during the well-child visit, as I said, and those are done between months 9, 18, 24, and 30, and they pay specific attention at months 18 and 24. And then the step 2 part of this testing, it would be a comprehensive diagnostic evaluation, or ADOPS. And this review looks at a child's behavior and development. The evaluation can include things like hearing tests, vision screenings, genetic testing, neurological testing, and other evaluations generally done with a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just blown away by that. So would you say that this is, these are kind of wrapped around cognitive function? I keep hearing cognitive function. Is that part of this?
Yes, very much part of that. You can see physical reactions, but a lot of cognitive function. Okay. Shelly will actually, it'll be a beautiful thing when Shelly comes on to be able to really expound on that as well.
Awesome, awesome. So we talk about children and the diagnoses in children and you know, getting that determined in children, but what about later in life? Can this come later in life and adults end up developing some signs of autism?
Well, generally they've probably had those signs and they were not, it was not seen either on a well-child's visit, and especially as high-functioning adults. And so those high-functioning adults learn to be able to cope. They know something may not be right, but during the course of life, they learn coping skills and mechanisms to be able to maintain a quality of life. What's really sad is that there really is no testing for adults, so there's development of testing at this point, but nothing that's been put into practical use. So really they're using the diagnostic values that they would use for children for adults. Sure. However, as an adult, it's really important that they be seen by their physician to rule out a potentially underlying physical illness. Maybe, a subclinical infection of some sort. And the doctor may often refer them to a psychiatrist or a psychologist as well. Wow,
okay. Lots of great information here. So we come to the point where it is about the microbiome. And I know in the last week to week and a half, I've been doing some research, and microbiome plays a huge factor when it comes to autism. So can you share with the viewers from a medical professional perspective, as a naturopath, what is it about the microbiome and what leads to autism as a result that we're now finding from the science backing and the clinical trials that lead to autism?
Well, there's a lot of factors, and there's not really one to say anything. And but the research continues, and so so let's talk about the microbiome. A typical person on average would have a quadrillion amount of intestinal bacteria, which are responsible for aiding in things like digestion, producing vitamins from our food, and promoting GI health, as well as affecting our immune system, because roughly 90% of our immune system is in our gut, right?
Right.
And so the review of over 150 research papers reveal that scientists have been reporting links between composition of gut bacteria and autistic behaviors since the 1960s. So that is, I found that very profound. That was even before I was born. And so they were already starting to see shifts and changes. But many of these studies suggest restoring a healthy gut balance in the gut bacteria can address symptoms of autism. Those which have ASD, they've long reported gastrointestinal issues such as diarrhea, constipation, gut pain, gas, children as well as adults. And this could be caused from things such as overgrowth of bad bacteria or fungal issues such as a candida burden. Biotoxins or preservatives and dyes have a direct impact on these children. They often have a leaky gut, and so you can see a shift there as well. But improvements have been made to show that integrating things like probiotics and prebiotics, as well as changing diet. Diet is critical in these kids. Casein and gluten-free diets especially, and avoiding processed foods and decreasing sugar intake, because, let's face it, processed foods aren't food, right? And so there's
Right.
no real nutrient value in there. And so when they break down, they form into chemicals called phenolics, and how a child can be affected by those phenolics and how it affects the brain is critical. So at this point, the precise links between the gut microbiome isn't known. There's even some thought that there may even be some environmental factors, maybe some potential genetic factors. When we talk about environmental factors, things like how was the baby delivered? Was it a vaginal birth or was it a C-section birth? Because it's critical of, the seeding of the microbiome at birth. Did the child receive lots of rounds of antibiotics at birth, or somewhere between development from, 0 to 12 months or 18 months? So those things are actually being evaluated and looked at. However, there's just a strong relationship to the effects and outcomes of how we treat the gut and how it affects the brain.
Wow. Yeah, so much science and so much more to learn in regards to our microbiome. It's going to be interesting to see what develops over the next couple of years and then beyond that.
Yeah.
There's just so much science behind it. And with all those trillions of microorganisms, I'm sure that they're going to be breaking them down into genomes and species, so forth and so on. So it's going to be exciting.
And they started, Jeff. They've started looking at species, and they have actually, this is pretty exciting. I was listening to a documentary today, and really we're kind of a host. We're kind of really, the amount of human part we are is so small compared to all the bacterial flora that makes up who we are and how we function. And so in a normal, healthy individual, they see a certain percentage of specific types of flora over those that have this autistic spectrum disorder, that have a greatly reduced amount.
Yeah, we're over 90% walking microorganisms and like 10% cell. So it's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Wow, incredible. Okay, so that brings us up to, thank you, Dr. Georgia Balsley. And that's going to bring us up to bringing on board Shelly. And Shelly, I'm going to ask you to start your video. And I just sent you there we go. So there's Shelly. And Shelly is from Michigan. She's a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, running her business named Love Life as a Whole. She's a daughter. She's a mom. She has two amazing boys, Brad, who's 28, and who is high functioning, and Garrett, who's 18, who is completely nonverbal. So I'd like to welcome Shelly as our guest speaker tonight. And Shelly, would you please share, include in your story, sharing your vision and your Jackson Autism Support Network with the viewers tonight?
All right, well, thank you so much for having me on and allowing me to share my story. As I was listening to Dr. Georgia, I was kind of with all the list of things that, describe our children and some of the behaviors and stuff. I felt like I had all these flashbacks coming back of how life was with both my boys when they were younger and stuff, and just how much we've overcome over the years. And to throw a little bit out there about the rate, it's, estimated right now at 1 in 59. And when Brad was diagnosed, it was 1 in 2,000. Wow. And when Garrett was diagnosed, it was 1 in 150.
Wow.
So to just see that continual rise in how many children are getting diagnosed, and it's so mind-blowing to me that we're still seeing so many kids be diagnosed, and it's sad. I mean, the divorce rate is 90% for families who have children with autism. I mean, it's just, and to have a single mom or a single dad out there trying to work and take care of their children. I mean, I'm fortunate that I have found things to do to be able to work from home, or I've worked for people who have allowed me to have very flexible schedules and stuff, but it's very hard. I mean, these families struggle a lot. And so, you know, with Brad, it's been a really amazing journey with him to see, you know, where we came, because when he was diagnosed, they wouldn't even diagnose that child. I was like, listen, you know, something's going on here. He's not developing the way he should, but he was so smart. I mean, this kid knew all his letters and numbers, and he was putting 35-piece puzzles together all by a year old. And he's flipping through phone books, and it was like the white pages. And we're like, what's he doing? You know, it's like he was reading. He was so fixated on letters and numbers when he was young. And this was at a year old. The kid's been watching Wheel of Fortune since he was 6 months old. He's so fixated on letters. It's been so crazy. But he's been so, the social skills have been so low, because at 18 months old, he went from kind of doing the whole babble and being on track and everything to just went mute. And so he didn't speak again until he was 4.5. And so then at 4.5, he started just blurting out these big old long words like dinosaur names and scientific names, because he loves science and history. And I'm just like, wow, where did all this come from? You know, like, you had nothing, and then now we're talking dinosaurs. And it was very fragmented. But, you know, that's just how our kids are. It's like we started doing a lot of more natural things, because I just didn't know back then. I mean, there was a lot of things that people were like, oh, you should try this, and you should try this, and you should try this. And, you know, there was a lot of things going on, and it was pretty overwhelming. And the therapy wasn't there. We were, you know, struggling. We did a lot of pilot programs with him and stuff. So to see him where he is now it's so amazing, because when he was diagnosed, they said, oh, you know, he'll never, you know, graduate high school. He'll never graduate college. He'll never drive. He'll never get married. He'll never do this, never do that, you know, set up a trust fund and expect that he's going to live in a group home the rest of his life. And I was like, wow, you know, you walk in with this wonderful bundle of joy, and then you like kind of go, okay, who am I walking out with now? Because you just destroyed everything I thought about my child. And it works really hard on a parent's mind of, you know, how sad you can become. And you know, and when you hear all that of, you know, what's the future for my kid, and it's very heartbreaking for our families, which is one of the reasons why I love sharing my story, because to see where we've come in all these years with Brad has been amazing. Because that diagnosis that they gave me, he has blown that out of the water. He graduated from high school. He's graduated from college, and he actually graduated from college with a theater background. He loves to get on stage and perform, and he's just amazing. And actually, I got to put a little plug out there. We have a video coming out soon with Brad, and it's like a little success story, a little 3-minute success story. So I'm excited for that. And it has him performing. He was just in a play. So, I mean, he's doing amazing. He is my right hand. He's my secretary in my business. I have him going to do banking, and he's done a lot. He's come a long, long way. So You just never know when things are going to change for our children, and you just don't give up. That's one of my biggest advice to families. Don't give up.
What a blessing.
It's been a huge blessing. And to see Garrett where he's come. So with Garrett, Garrett was born jaundice. And both my kids were C-sections. So, when Dr. George was talking about, some of the science that's going on, and myself, I have a yeast overgrowth that I've been tested for. So, when we look at where it's been is like, the science is saying it's genetic, it's saying it's environmental, it's a combination of all of it, really. We've really, any of us that are living and breathing it, we can look back and we can see some issues with the genetic part of it. And then we can, look at some of the toxicity in our environment and stuff like that, which is what we found with Garrett. So when Garrett was born, like I said, he was born jaundice, and they send you home with the blanket, the lights and stuff, and they say, everything's going to be wonderful. Well, I think there's already some stuff going on there that's, already against our children. And so then we as parents, we don't really know what we should be doing in this, world that we live in now. And with all the toxicities, we've got the air fresheners and, and the food and everything, like Dr. George was saying. And it's like, we're just doing life as parents,
Mm-hmm.
And so once Garrett got over the whole being, yellow and stuff, I wasn't on that path. Even though I had Brad, I wasn't on that path of, oh, I need the diet, I need, all these supplements, I need this, I need that. I wasn't there, because we tried gluten-free with Brad, and like we didn't see much of a change in him. So to me, I was like, well, I'm not going to go through all that if I'm not really seeing change. But I did cook. I mean, I cooked my meals. We didn't eat out a lot. We tended to be more into like fruits and vegetables. At that time, we lived out in California, and we ate a ton of fruits and stuff, everything that was very ripe and wasn't shipped across the country like we see now most of the time. And so I feel like that was a plus for Brad. And so, but we did have him on supplements, and we were doing more of trying to make better choices. So then with Garrett, I just kept on that same path. I just kept giving him, kind of what I did Brad, and we found that phytonutrients, things that had the higher phytonutrients was a big thing for Brad, and so we did that with Garrett, and we didn't see much of a change. I mean, we didn't see, he seemed to be on track for developing and stuff. And then at about a year old, we all of a sudden just saw him kind of just stop developing, and he just kind of hung there for a while, and we're like, oh, are we going to go down this path again? And so then what happened is he started really slipping. He started slipping back, and he started, you could see him, fall into the glazed look, and definitely not meeting any of his milestones and stuff. And so we really knew he had autism at that point. And so we got him tested, and he was tested at 4.5 and diagnosed with autism. And then by the time he was 6, it was just bad. He had slipped so far. He had the self-injurious behaviors. He would bite the back of his hand, and then he would take this hand and he'd hit his head. And sometimes he'd pound it really hard. And he'd go through our house, and he was flipping over our furniture, and I mean, just tearing apart his bedroom. We had key locks on every single one of our doors. We had a credenza in his room with his clothes in it. We had key locks on that so that he couldn't get into nothing, because he started chewing on all the fabrics, and I mean, pillowcases and sheets and anything that was in his view, he was chewing on, and he was just you could see he was in pain. He was hurting, and I had no idea what to do. I mean, I was at a loss here. I thought, well, I kind of knew what autism was, but I was really at a loss with him. And then we had him tested for heavy metals, and I was blown away. We got a test back that he had a body full of arsenic, and I was just like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? And I just pretty much just freaked out. I went through my house. I grabbed every single thing that touched his body, and I started sitting in front of the computer hours upon hours upon hours and just Googling that and arsenic, and I found out our laundry soap had arsenic in it. And I don't know if that was sure, it's not the sole source of it. But when I think back about how much he was chewing on all the fabrics and everything, and it was nonstop. I mean, he had a piece of clothing or something in his mouth all the time, chewing on it. And, and they would try to give him these like chewy toys and stuff, but it would just like saliva was just like pouring out everywhere. And I'm like, no, we gotta at least give him the towel, at least it's cut. I mean, I have no idea why he was doing all that at the time. And so that's what led me down my path to go to school to become a certified health coach, so that I could learn more about nutrition and the things that I needed to do for him, because I was at a loss, and the doctors were at a loss. I mean, it was 1 in 50 at that time, but the doctors still were at a loss at what really to do. They were like, you can put him on, these meds. I mean, you could put him on, get him on the gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And I even studied with somebody that specializes in a lot of different diets. And we tried several different diets, and the diets did help Garrett a lot. And we started seeing him calm down a little bit. And then we added in some really high quality supplements that really attack the inflammation. And we saw him just start to come down a little bit more. And we just kept layering things that would help him start bringing down his stress and that kind of stuff. And that opened up a lot for us, because then we were able to get him into therapies, because he was a mess. There was no way of even getting him into therapy. Because I tell parents all the time, it's like, think about it. If you're not working from the inside out, and if you're, most people have had a headache before. So I use that as one of my examples. I was like, okay, if you have this headache, and it doesn't go away the next day, you have it the next day, and then you have it the next day, and it's just getting more intense day after day after day. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to duct tape your mouth, and you're not going to tell anybody, because you're just going to be able to do it through behaviors. And then I'm going to start pulling on you and taking you to this place and this place, and they're going to, want you to do this and that, and you don't even know why they're wanting you to do that, because your head's pounding, and it's, you're going to be like lashing out. You're going to have those aggressive behaviors and stuff. And that's how our kids are feeling. They have these pain inside of them, and half the time they don't even know where it's coming from. Because I would just say to my verbal kid, who I can have a great conversation with, I would just say, he'd be like, I don't feel good. I'm like, well, what's wrong? I don't know. I just don't feel good. And I'm like, well, does it hurt in your stomach? I don't know. It just hurts. They don't know. It's just this pain, and their sensories are off, and they can't tell where it's at. So it's a combination of a lot of stuff going on inside of them. But when you address it from the inside out, it's really helpful, because then you can do the therapies that help with all the loss of the things that they've missed. Because with Garrett, that's what we saw. We saw all this whole time. It was like 5 years or so that he was in this place where he couldn't think or anything. We lost so much learning, and now we're trying to go back and pick that up. Well, he's a teenager, and cognitively he's a teenager, and he doesn't want to see any baby stuff, which is where he's at in some areas. And so it's like this big ball of mess that we're like going, oh my gosh, like where do we start with trying to teach him how to get from point A to point B in some of his learning? And so that's another reason why early intervention is so key, because then you're not going back and trying to recover all those lost years.
Yeah, can I just interject here for a second? Because I just want to go back to, well, first, amazing stories. You are a super mom, for sure.
Oh,
you know,
thanks.
you're a godsend. Your kids are just truly blessed to have you. I wanted to go back to the arsenic thing, because I did post on my Facebook through my research that the juices out there today that are in plastic bottles are riddled with arsenic. And I was like, and this is what we feed our children. And, you know, the apple juices, the orange juices, the cranberry juices, ocean spray, and, you know, all of those things. And even some of the food. So that's something for the listeners to, you know, really do some research into that if there's that concern. The other thing is, if you are on board here and you have some questions, throw them in the chat. If you do, great. If you don't, that's fine too, because we do want to try to get to a couple of questions to get those answered before you leave. But then I wanted, Shelly, if you could go back, we had a really lovely talk the other day in regards to a number of years ago, this wonderful doctor that you were introduced to, and you started to, you know, use some of his products and had some success. And then, you know, you went to that other period, and then just recently it's like, oh my gosh, that's him. You know, I'm on board. And just tell us that and the successes that you're having with the product line that is specifically targeting the microbiome. And for those that are on, these products are targeting the strain within the species of the genome. So that's how targeted these products are. So each of these products have unique attributes that specifically target these little strains that are geared towards gut health and mental wellness as well.
Right. So when I started on all of our supplements, I started with, like I said, the high anti-inflammatory, and then we went over to a product that helped. It was helped for tired, stressed, and depressed, and I was like, sign me up. I'm all three of those, and my kids were too. I mean, it was like a bomb going off in our house every single day, which is where I met Dr. Sean, and it was like we went from the bomb going off every day to just everything was just lowering, and I was amazed at what one little thing could help, how it could just bring our life into order. And we've been on it since 2009, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing ever. And I was like, no way am I ever getting off of it. And then yes, he went to another company, and when I found out that he was creating something that helped with the whole microbiome, and the research that I had done, and I just couldn't. It was like I was having great success, but I could tell with all three of us there was a piece missing. I knew there was a piece missing for me with my yeast overgrowth. I tried my with me having migraines. Every time I tried to do the yeast, it was a migraine. And so I thought, you know, if that's me, my kids are going to have problems too. And especially Garrett, because Garrett had a high yeast overgrowth too. And so I did a lot of research on the brain gut connection and how it really is a big piece for our kids. And I just couldn't find anything. So then when I found out that Dr. Sean was doing these other products, I was on board and I tried them. We've been on them about a year. And I'm like, I'm so blown away with the results that I'm seeing with both my kids. And it was interesting because, and I didn't share this with you guys the other day, but I was actually sitting there listening to Garrett the other day, and, you know, he's been nonverbal pretty much most of, you know, all of his life. and he babbles a little, and we hear little sounds, but they've never been like anything like we could say he's like, oh, he's maybe forming a word or something like that. No, it's never been anything like that. And then recently I started hearing where it was almost like he's talking in another language, but I would only hear it periodically. I would like, and he used to watch Elmo in every different language except English. So I thought, well, maybe he's throwing a few words together in different languages. I don't know, who knows? And so but every time I pull out my recorder to try and grab it, he'd stop. It was that infrequent that I mean, I was never able to get it. The other day, I'm sitting there, and it was almost like the whole entire day he was doing those noises. And I was like, wow, like he's really starting to come out of his shell and start really making the noises. And with with Brad, what I'm seeing with Brad is a lot of social. It's more like our kids are black and white. And we always say they never cross into that gray area. It's black and white with them. And I'm actually seeing Brad go into that gray area. So when things are not so structured, he actually is handling it really well. And the social that he's doing, I mean, he's having conversations that he's actually bringing up. Before it was like dragging conversations out of Brad. It's like he would talk to you, but you'd have to be the first one to initiate it and try to like kind of pull it. And not anymore. He's like actually starting conversations. So I'm awesome. So exciting. It is very exciting.
That is amazing. That is very, very cool. Well, we're coming up on to the 45 minutes here, and I don't see any questions, but that's no problem. We're hoping that everybody that joined us tonight got some value from Dr. Georgia and from Shelly. And again, this is a series that we're running every month, 2 times during the month. And sorry, I thought I turned this off, and let me just get this off. Sorry about that. So we're running it twice a month, and 2 weeks from tonight, we are going to have Heather Woody on as a guest speaker. She is a mom with 3 children with autism. And but I want to thank Shelly for sharing her story. We talked the other day, and I had tears coming down my eyes. Thank God I was on the phone and not on a Zoom or anything like that. But May 23rd is Autism Part 2. June 6th is Anxiety and Depression. And then June 20th is going to be on diabetes. So for those of you who joined us tonight, thank you. Reach out to the person who invited you to get more information. We do have what I do want to share very quickly here is I'm going to do this here and share my main screen. And Shelly, actually, can you see that, Shelly in Georgia?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Shelly put together this Autism, Where Do I Start? And it's a great document just to get started in getting some information. So, so with that, I've sent it off to Shelly, I've sent it off to Dr. Georgia. Reach out to them or reach out to myself, and I'd be happy to share that document with you. And I want to thank you again for joining us tonight, and hope to see you on our May 23rd second series on autism, and wishing everybody a wonderful rest of the evening and blessed one as well. Okay. Any last parting words, Dr. Georgia and Shelly? Let's do Dr.
Oh, Shelly, people don't realize with children, like you said, any little changes are significant. So what a beautiful blessing to start seeing transformations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
Super. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Wishing everybody a great night. Okay.